On today's show, power ranking the futures of the worst teams in the NBA. Does any team come anywhere close to Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs? It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And joining me is my partner in crime, the host of Locked On Heat, David Ramil. David, how happy are you that the Heat don't fall into this category of one of the worst teams in the NBA that we're about to power rank the futures of?
Well, pretty optimistic. They tend to be one of the teams that just always kind of finds themselves somewhere in the middle, never too high, never too low. So we'll see how it all pans out. But, you know, there's some potential teams that are kind of sleepers among this group that we're talking about. And who knows, maybe they might be able to climb up our potential power rankings to the top 10-ish teams.
Some might call that NBA purgatory. Here, we like to call that where the Miami Heat just live. So let's go ahead. On today's show, we've been doing this power ranking series throughout this offseason here on our edition of Locked On NBA Game Night. And rather than try to power rank who's the best or the most, competitive of these, kind of bottom feeder teams at the bottom of the NBA landscape, we thought it'd be fun to take a look at these remaining teams that we haven't done during our power ranking episodes and take a look at the brightest futures. Who has the best future of these teams that failed to make the playoffs or make the play-in tournament in some capacity this past season? And so I think, first we want to let you know that we appreciate you for joining us here, hanging out with us here at Locked On NBA, making us part of your day every single day. But the team that immediately jumps to mind, David, the team that didn't make the playoffs last year, but that very clearly has arguably the brightest future, maybe one of the brightest futures in the entire NBA, not just including this group, but the entire NBA landscape, is the San Antonio Spurs. It feels like there's no team that even holds a candle to the Spurs. When you look at the teams that missed the playoffs last season, and you look at what the Spurs have with Victor Wembanyama and all the other fantastic members of their young core, all the talent on that roster, they are far and away, to me at least, clearly the best of this group. Do you agree or disagree?
I'd have to say that that's probably the case. It just, some of it feels dependent on whether or not Victor Wembanyama is able to stay healthy, because as we saw last season, they were rolling. They were one of those fringe playoff teams. Then he goes out for the rest of the year, and you never know what could happen in terms of the blood clot issues that were, dogged him last season. So you hope that maybe it's something he could avoid moving forward, and that's the case. Obviously, yes. I mean, you've got a top, let's say, 15 to 20-ish player at this point in Victor Wembanyama, with a potential to rise even higher. And that automatically puts them into an upper echelon. Very few teams obviously have players that fit into that category. San Antonio has one, and they've got the complementary players around them that can also be productive, be impactful, and a young core too. Like, there are several players on that roster that can be impactful players, not just now, but years down the road. So when you're looking at specifically a bright future, I don't think there's a team that has a brighter one right now. So they're not in win now mode, but they're also a team that's capable of winning now and winning down the road as well.
Absolutely. And I think that, you get into, obviously, the injury stuff with Wemby is so tough, because you can make this argument about so many of the injury prone stars in the league, or you can, you take a look at, guys who never amount to what they could have been at the NBA level. You think about some of the greatest what ifs in NBA history. A guy like Greg Oden possibly comes to mind, right? Who never was able to realize his potential as, one of the, at the time we thought he was going to come into the NBA and be one of the next great dominant defensive big men to, really make a claim to be, one of the greats of the game, and then just never got the chance because of injuries, which is such a, unfortunate part of the game. But all the makings there of Wemby to be, one of the, best players in the league for years to come, health permitting. Is it weird to say that even if you were to remove Wemby from the equation, I still feel very strongly that the Spurs, with the rest of the talent that they have, with Steph Castle just now getting Dylan Harper, who did they get at 10 this past draft? I'm blanking on his name. Carter Bryant.
Carter Bryant.
Yeah, Carter Bryant. Like they have so much young talent outside of just Wemby, which is one of the reasons that I think you really like them. And it's not just about the super young talent, the guys who are only rookies or only played a year or two in the NBA. People forget maybe that De'Aaron Fox is, he's on the younger end of like an established star in today's NBA, right? He is a little further ahead in his timeline. Yeah, a little further ahead than Wemby, but still on the younger end of the spectrum to where you still have, at least another, 5, 6, 7 years of high level play out of De'Aaron Fox as he's just now entering his prime. And I think that's what makes the Spurs so appealing as a team to kind of look at here and think about their future and how incredibly bright it is, as well as all the draft capital that they still have. They have all their own draft capital. They still own some draft capital from the Atlanta Hawks. Like they've got, I really don't think any other team comes even remotely close to them in this conversation. It's like the Spurs and then a gigantic gap. And then like whoever we're going to get to is the next team after this.
Yeah, they've got just the right blend. I mean, kind of similar, I would say, almost to, with the exception of the amount of picks that they have moving forward, but kind of looking how Oklahoma City built this potential behemoth, I think you could kind of look at what San Antonio has and say they've got the right thing, the right combination, almost similarly to what the Thunder have done. They had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander there. They've got Victor Wembanyama in San Antonio. Again, you have a star, you have young talent, you have potential, you've got draft picks. Do you have any concerns about coaching? Because we don't know what Mitch Johnson is capable of doing. We just haven't seen him. So a lot of that has to do with, we've seen young coaches fail to be able to maximize rosters before. So you wonder whether or not he's capable of doing the same thing. Can he take this group and lead them to that next phase of their development? Because it's so difficult, because you're right there. You're right on the precipice, and you're trying to get out of the past few seasons of rebuilding towards that next level. That's very difficult to do, and you wonder whether or not Johnson's capable of doing it.
And here's the thing. I agree with you. Mitch Johnson is a bit of a question mark at this point, but I will say that having served under Greg Popovich for a number of years, Greg Popovich with that really extensive coaching tree that spans out into so many different organizations across the entire NBA landscape, if he's another product of that Greg Popovich coaching tree, I'm sure he'll turn out just fine as a head coach once he's really, taken the team under his own. Oh, you got some
Bruce
doubts?
Brown? Was it Bruce Brown? What was his name? The coach for the Philadelphia 76ers? Brett Brown. Yes, sorry. Yes.
Okay, so you got one like so out of how many good ones? Like how many other we got? Budenholzer, Ime Udoka. No, Spoelstra's not a Popovich disciple. No. Kerr is a Popovich disciple.
Well, they played for him, I guess, but that's not really quite fair either. I don't know, PJ Carlesimo. Like, there's a lot there. I mean,
there are a number. I think the good far outweighs the bad, and then you get to that. So, but even if he is a question mark, or even if he doesn't amount to being a good coach, right, a good head coach, I feel like that's it. I won't say an easy way to upgrade, but the Spurs are kind of a storied organization, and I feel like if they felt the need to go out and find a coach, first off, there would be so many coaches who would be salivating at the thought of being able to coach a player as talented as Victor Wembanyama. They'd be lining up to be able to get their hands on him. And so I think it wouldn't be hard for them to move on from Mitch Johnson if they felt that he wasn't the right guy to get them to that next stage of being competitive and finding a proper candidate.
I'm just a big my feeling is that coaching doesn't always matter as much in the ways that we think it does, and matters a lot more in those things that people don't realize that they do. And taking this group as a young moldable entity and helping them get over that hump and understand what it takes to win at that next level, I think is going to be so crucial for this group and in terms of how we gauge potential. And you like what Mark Daigneault has able to do with the Thunder. It's not just about acquiring talent. That could have just gone south very quickly if it wasn't the right coach, if it wasn't the right idea, the right culture to kind of get this group to that next point. And you wonder whether or not Johnson could do the same thing in San Antonio. Again, I don't know. No one does. But you like where they're at as far as the perspective of they've got all the right things in place, and now you're just kind of wondering and waiting to see if they're able to take that kind of leap and build something sustainable over the next few seasons.
I will say, just on the Mark Daigneault front, as a quick aside, I think you see a lot of a coach, like, when they are coaching teams that aren't as talented, right? You see kind of how good they can really be. And I think Daigneault has done a fantastic job with the Thunder, even before acquiring all this top end talent, even before SGA turned into, this year in, year out MVP caliber player. The Thunder were still, even when they were losing, they still lost in like a respectable fashion. Like, you could tell there was accountability, there was a culture being built there.
Yes.
It was a stark contrast to whatever the hell the Rockets had going on during the Steven Silas era. That's all I'll say about that. It was rough doing, apples to apples comparisons about trying to figure out what was going on between these two franchises who rebuilt at the same time, weirdly enough. So coming up, does any team come even remotely close to the San Antonio Spurs? Who's up next on the future power rankings here? Do the Blazers have a star already, possibly? And the Nets and Wizards still missing their cornerstones. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Look, most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your smartphone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever having to open up a spreadsheet. Look, when I started using Monarch, I was frankly shocked at how much I was spending on subscriptions that I didn't even use anymore. That's the worst feeling, right? You go take a look and you see your bank statement. It's like, oh, that one hit again. Oh, I need to cancel it. And then it's in one ear, out the other. You forget about it. And then before you know it, you're being dinged again next month. Monarch puts all that in one spot so you can take a look at it and cancel them. Organize yourself financially, start saving your money. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA. And continuing on here at Locked On NBA, thanks so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen each and every day. For your next listen, go find the Locked On show for your favorite team. All right, David, this is where things get really tough, I think, after, the clear-cut Spurs in that number one spot with Wembanyama. Who do you have as the brightest future at number two behind the Spurs of the teams that did not make the playoffs last season? That's the caveat for everybody listening, watching on YouTube. We're just going off the teams that did not make the postseason last year.
Is it crazy to think the Suns are putting something together there? Because they've just been in this nebulous phase as far as having these stars and then not having the requisite talent around them. And now it's kind of the opposite, where they've got a much more complete team that they did. They just lack the star power, but they still have Devin Booker. Just the same argument we made for Victor Wembanyama. As far as potential, it doesn't seem like they kind of scream off the page. But you look at what Phoenix has there, and they've got Jalen Green, they've got Devin Booker, they've got some nice players there. I don't. To me, it just seems like a group that's capable of winning both now and down the road. I don't know if their ceiling is as high as, say, a Spurs group or even and the team that you mentioned earlier, the Portland Trailblazers. But I kind of like where they're headed as far as their impact this upcoming season and down the road. If they make the right moves here, maybe that's not even the point of this exercise, but I just kind of like where Phoenix is at. And I think they've got that potential to be an upset team this year.
I think in the heart of this exercise, we're just talking about the overall futures, right? The futures of these organizations. And I can see where you're coming from with Phoenix, but here's my hang up on them, right? Is Booker is nearing 30. He's not quite there yet. He's nearing 30. And as committed and loyal, maybe Booker is this next generation's version of Damian Lillard, right? Loyalty above all, refuses to ever leave the desert, loves it in Phoenix, yada yada yada. But I struggle to see this Suns team, this current iteration of the Suns team, even with the moves they made this offseason, acquiring, flipping KD, they brought in Dylan Brooks, who's a great win now player. They did add Jalen Green, who still has crazy high upside and potential and can be a winning player at times in certain contexts. They added some depth. They added some young defensive pieces, some talent in the draft. Like there's a lot to like about what Phoenix did this past offseason. But where I come away struggling to buy stock, I guess, or to think so highly of the Suns' future is, one, they still don't own their own future draft capital. So if things go haywire in Phoenix, they're screwed. They're on the hook to the Rockets for all those draft picks for the next, 3-ish years. On top of that, I struggle to see how this version of the Suns team actually even managed to crack the play-in this stacked Western Conference. And with that being the case, how many more years is Booker going to be okay with the Suns being a middling team, not making any postseason noise, not even sniffing the play-in tournament, before he gets to a point where he's fed up and says, you know what? I gave it my best. I tried for you guys. I was loyal for 10 years. Trade me to a place where I can win. And the moment that happens, the moment we get a Devin Booker trade request, the Suns are back in the basement of the West, because then they don't have their clear-cut number one guy. They don't have their clear-cut franchise player anymore. So I do think that while they have Booker right now, sure, but I just don't know how much longer Booker's actually going to be a Sun for if they can't actually figure things out pretty quickly and put a competitive roster around him, because he doesn't have many more years of his overall prime left on the table at this point.
That's a fair argument, and I totally see that perspective. I just also think that of all the players that we're talking about in all these different rosters, I think you could make the argument that Booker's probably second best of Wembanyama in terms of their overall player rankings at the NBA level. So they already have that star. But as you said, maybe he's not on that roster much longer. And that being the case, though, I still believe in their upside, because you can trade Booker to restock whatever you have there, or to continue to add to whatever this group is. That's Look, I'm willing to entertain other possibilities. I think Portland is probably the team that we'd be most likely to lean to as the second brightest future, because they do have, if not a star level player, they've got a good balance of talent right there already in place. So I think, again, I don't know. I think I'm looking maybe perhaps more nearsightedly in that Devin Booker's there now and he can help this team win now. And if they have to replace him in the future by trading him, they can do that and still add to their kind of collection of young potential players and stuff like that. So, but who do you have as the second best team, or the second brightest future of this group of candidates?
The Washington Wizards. And I'm saying it with my whole chest, David. I truly believe it. And look, if Wizards fans, wherever you are, I'm in your corner. I believe in you. I believe in the organization.
Both of you.
I believe in the Look, I'm so serious.
All right. Too easy.
And you know what? You just said you're doing it a bit nearsighted. I'm looking a little too far out, but I look at the collection of young talent that they have on that roster, and I truly believe, first off, we were just done talking about the Suns. The Wizards own the swap rights to the Suns pick in 2026, and I do not think the Suns are going to be a very good team in 2026. I think they're going to crash and burn, and that pick is going to convey to the Wizards. So here's my thing, is just, I like so much of the talent that they have up and down their roster. I'm a huge fan of Trey Johnson, who they just got this past draft. I do believe in Alex Sarr. I think he's exactly a modern day big man. I think he's exactly what you want. Bilal Coulibaly. I really think Cam Whitmore didn't have a chance to shine in Houston, but will in Washington, and will be a high level scorer and very useful for that team. They have so much young talent. They're missing a quote unquote cornerstone at this point.
Yes.
But the benefit of where the Wizards are at is they've got this insane collection of all this other talent. They just need a little bit of luck to go their way, right? The Wizards got kind of screwed in this past draft with the Mavericks winning the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, but all they need is that little bit of luck to get themselves a true 1A cornerstone in the draft, in this next 1 or 2 seasons. And then suddenly you're cooking with something in Washington. And I feel like that leads to a much more sustainable future. The Wizards are following, a model of they bottomed out. I know they haven't been a great team for a while, but they are truly leaning into the tank right now. And they've got an opportunity, I think, to really turn things around. Some of that's going to be dependent on coaching, and obviously there's going to be some front office decisions down the line. Maybe they don't have a proven track record of success for me to feel this confident on, but I like the collection of young talent that they have, and that's mostly what I'm bought in on here.
2 points also. I mean, they've got CJ McCollum and Jordan Poole on that roster, both tradable veterans. If they don't fit that long-term plan,
no more Jordan Poole. They flipped Jordan Poole for CJ.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's right.
I was just talking with somebody the other day that forgot to see that Jordan Poole was on the Pelicans, and I was like, yeah, they did a trade. So
Pelicans kind of forgettable, but that was my bad there. So no, CJ McCollum, a good player, obviously never quite the star, but also a flippable player in terms of like if they want to move him to a contender or anything like that. And he's still there who kind of provide some leadership and guidance to a very young roster. And then second, of Coulibaly or Sarr or anybody else on the roster, who do you think has star potential that can kind of be, if not that cornerstone, at least the next tier below a cornerstone, kind of like a star that would lead to maybe attracting another cornerstone down the road?
If I was ranking them, I'd probably go Alex Sarr 1, Trey Johnson 2, Coulibaly 3. I really like Trey Johnson, and I think that he is so much more than just like, he's not just that archetype of like the high, the bucket getting flashy two guard. He's coming in really polished. Like his game at Texas was so nice, and he's coming in as such a polished scorer as a rookie. And I think that's only going to get better. I see a little bit of like shades of like maybe like a slightly more athletic Devin Booker at times watching him play. So, does he actually achieve that potential? Who knows? But the appealing, it's still very appealing to look at. And so maybe he's the star that the Wizards were hoping to get, as far as a cornerstone. I don't know if he'll ever be like that true 1A kind of engine for a team, but they've got so many good parts there. Cam Whitmore still could be the type of player that, hell, he's showed flashes where you thought maybe he'd lead the NBA in scoring one day. Like, he's got some other holes in his game, but there's so much young talent there, and they're going to go through this phase of parsing through that young talent, figuring out who sticks, who doesn't. But during that process, they just need a little bit of lottery luck to go their way, get the ping pong balls to bounce right in the next draft or two. And if they do walk away with a legitimate cornerstone and some of these guys reach their overall potential, you're talking about a Wizards team that built through the draft, very similar to how the Thunder built through the draft, although, acquiring SGA via trade, but built everything else through the draft. And maybe that's the move at the end of the day. Maybe the Wizards make a very shrewd trade for a guy that, is in an unhappy situation, right, and that's how they acquire their marquee star player, and that leads to some competitiveness down the line. But I'm bought in, Wizards fans. I like what's going on in DC right now. Coming up, we got to talk about who maybe is at the bottom of this power rankings list and who has the bleakest future of the teams left here at the bottom of the NBA. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by OpenPhone. Look, if you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time that you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a different service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait around? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. OpenPhone lets you manage business calls and texts from a single app. The shared inbox feature is a game changer. Your team can jump in to any conversation instantly without missing a beat, and their AI agent handles after hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer. OpenPhone is offering our listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonnba. That's OpenPhone, OPENPHONE.com/lockedonnba. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. And final segment here at Locked On NBA Game Night. All right, David, before we get to who might have the worst future of these remaining teams, we didn't bring them up yet because they're in such an interesting spot. But the Pelicans, just what's your read on where the Pelicans are at? They're still doing this old song and dance with Zion. When he's healthy, he's a top 15 player in the NBA, and he looks like he could be a year in, year out, all NBA caliber player, but he's not healthy, right? And it's, it almost feels like they have Stockholm syndrome at this point where, like, when he starts to play well, they're like, oh, we're bought in, he's here again. And then he gets injured, or he's not around, or there's drama off the court. Where are you at with the Pelicans? Because I kept wanting to come back and rank them high on this list, and I just couldn't do it. couldn't buy into them.
I just can't. I don't know what to make of them. And I know that's not exactly fair, but I would say that even Jake Madison, host of Locked On Pelicans, probably doesn't know exactly what to make of the Pelicans either, because so much of it hinges on whether or not Zion can be the player he's expected to be. And maybe that ship has already sailed. Maybe there are no more expectations for him. And you already heard scuttlebutt about them potentially finding a way to move him, or maybe find a team that might be interested in taking on that salary, or whatever issues might come accompanying that incredible talent. But he's so unique as a player, and the expectations were so high that it's kind of hard to gauge this team and then have to overlook him and yet consider him at the same time. So I don't know. I mean, as far as the roster is currently constructed, let's assume that he's kind of the status quo of what he's been for the last few years of his career. A good player was he's available, and then knowing almost automatically that he's going to miss a handful of games over the course of each season, that should still be good enough. And I think that even the acquisition of Kevon Looney is going to be a little underrated. I think they've got some talent on there, but I don't know that their future seems particularly bright either. They're a team kind of built to be okay-ish in the now, and I don't know what happens 4 years from now, because I don't know that they have that next kind of underlying layer of talent that could kind of help take him to that next level in the future. So I don't know. To me, they're kind of just an okay team with a slightly higher ceiling than some of these other teams in this group, and yet not much of a future either.
The problem is they're not quite as young as some of the other teams in this tier, but the young players that they do have, right? Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, DeJounte Murray, like there's talent there. There's a lot to like there. Yves Missi is solid. I keep coming back to the Pelicans thinking, if you could just guarantee Zion was healthy, I actually really like the makeup of this roster. I don't like what Joe Dumars did with like the future draft pick and everything. It's like you have to take some of that into consideration about like that horrendous draft night trade that they made with the Atlanta Hawks. But at some point they need to decide whether they're going to just keep doing this whole thing with Zion, or whether they want to cut bait and eventually move on. And then that begs the question is, who out there would be maybe at this point dumb enough to think, you know what, he wasn't healthy for them, but maybe, just maybe it'll work for us, right? Maybe he'll work for us. Maybe he'll be healthy for our team. I don't think you're going to get back anything crazy good for Zion at this point. And yeah. I literally only just thought of this like 30 seconds ago, David. So if it's awful, you can blame me for it, shame me for it, whatever you want to do. But like, how crazy would a Zion for Paul George and VJ Edgecombe trade be?
Ooh.
Like, Edgecombe's going to be buried on a Sixers team that wants to win right now. Zion, when healthy, could absolutely help the Sixers win at a super high level. And the Pelicans get a reset.
The trauma of the 76ers hinging their future on Joel Embiid and now Paul George are like, you know what? We love us some injured superstars. Bring us Zion Williamson.
I mean, but here's the thing. They're already built to bank on Embiid. So like you have to bank on an injured star. Like you're already dealing with that ramification. Yeah. So like unless they're ready to move on from Embiid, like I don't know, it greatly increases their ceiling, I feel like, but it also drastically lowers their floor to where it's like, God forbid if Zion and Embiid get hurt, like you're screwed. But they were already screwed all of last season with their big three missing pretty much the entire year. And they're also tied to that Paul George contract is the thing, right? Like that Paul George contract is an albatross. I'm going to go so far as say it's the worst contract in the NBA right now. And they're on the hook for the next 3 seasons. At least if you get Zion, like when he's healthy, he is a top 15 player. Even if you got Zion for 40 games out of the year, I feel like that's better than current day Paul George at his price tag. But it also includes having to give up VJ Edgecombe. So I don't know. I literally thought of that like on the fly, and I was like, how would you what team would you get rid of Zion to?
Oh, I don't. There isn't one. There isn't one. No, really. You kind of you tie yourselves to his future and his health. Look, we entertained the possibility in Miami, because I think they've had a proven track record of these reclamation type projects. You know what their conditioning program is like. You know that they've taken injured players before. As soon as Pat Riley took over the organization in 1995, like took a chance on Tim Hardaway after he was missed the season before due to a knee injury. And that's just happened all the way. Even for a guy like Jimmy Butler, whose reputation was in the tank, he wanted to give him a chance. He gave him a chance in Miami, and clearly that worked out for the team as well. So a guy like Zion Williamson, there are Duke connections throughout that front office. Could he be that kind of star that they're looking for to help propel the team to that next level? I don't know what Miami would have to give up in exchange for a guy like Zion, but I could see the pairing work just from a narrative perspective, and just there's potential there that Williamson finally buys in. Then there's also potential that he sees South Beach and he's like, nah, I don't care about anything else but what we got going on down here. And that ain't good.
Man. Oh goodness. I honestly, Zion and South Beach would be interesting. Of this group of teams, we've talked about a handful of them so far, kind of done our loose power ranking here. Who do you think definitively has the bleakest future? The one where you're just like, you do not like their outlook whatsoever. And, just prayers up to the fans of this of this organization. Where do you come away with thinking about these teams?
Can I take the easy way out here and say none of them? Like, I really think that you can kind of convince yourself about all these teams in some way. My gut tells me Charlotte, just because Charlotte has Charlotted for so many years now that I don't know what's going to happen. I am probably as big I don't know the detractor, I guess, of LaMelo Ball as there possibly is. I just can't stand it. I can't stand his game. I just don't like watching him play. He's off injured. I don't think he contributes in any way, shape, or form towards any kind of positive impact whatsoever. And your future is tied almost inherently to this guy being out on the floor. And for what? So he could put up 25 useless points in yet another 60 loss season. So that's kind of where I'm at. And yet, I guess you could kind of talk yourselves into some of the other players they have in that roster, and there's potential there. So is it too much of an easy way out to say you could kind of make an argument for all these groups that, you know what, I kind of like this. I kind of like said player, and I kind of like where their future is. Because even Chicago, I mean, if you're depending on how you feel about Bazelis, I think he's another guy that you can kind of say, you know what, we got lucked into a good potential star here, or a guy that can, be a really solid impact player. There's a lot to like. And that's kind of what about
Chicago playing tournament. Why are they catching strays here, David?
Yeah,
I'm just messing with you. It's okay. I mean, it's one of those where you're considering the future. No, I hear and see what you're saying, and you're right. You could talk, looking through this list of 10 different teams, right? 5 from the East, 5 from the West. You could find a way to talk yourself into a lot of these organizations and say, well, this, that, and the other thing. And like, that's the beauty of, unfortunately, being at the bottom of the pack is like, all you need is one season or one draft really to break your way with a, franchise altering talent. And then suddenly you're on top of the world. You're bought in, everything, the world is your oyster. I do worry about teams that have a player like a LaMelo Ball, although his talent hasn't exactly translated to wins. I don't know if I'm as down or low on LaMelo Ball as you are, but that was certainly a rant that you went on. So I think there was maybe some locked away feelings there, but I worry about the teams that are on the precipice of like starting to be a little too good and then dragging themselves away from the ability to get that franchise altering talent. We didn't get the chance to talk too much about the Blazers, but I will say, I think the Blazers have the makings of what could be a really, really solid team. And I even tease it up a little bit. So much of it is like they really banked on Scoot Henderson to be that guy, right? They really believed Henderson would be like the heir to the point guard throne in Portland after Damian Lillard. And I'll be honest, David, I'm still kind of bought in on Scoot Henderson. Like, I think that he had a rough rookie season. He showed some serious signs of progression in his second campaign. And I don't know that he'll ever reach like the true heights of what we thought he would be when there was like, the whole Scoot Henderson versus Victor Wembanyama whole thing, like, and remember them playing together, the G League exhibition game and all that. Like, and Scoot balled out. He looked great playing against Wemby, and everyone was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, this draft is loaded. And Scoot hasn't done too much in these first 2 seasons to be, he lost his starting role, right? He got moved to the bench last year. But I think there's a lot to like there as a player. And point guard isn't, notoriously the toughest position to come in and learn how to play at a very high level. So I'm not out on Scoot Henderson by any means. And I still think there's a world where he does develop into the star that the Blazers need him to be and want him to become. Sure. And if he does that with the other collection of talent that they have on their roster, I really do like
Bright
the
future.
Blazers, and I like their future a lot. I had them third on my list, actually, after the Wizards. So for what it's worth.
So to answer your question, what's the worst team? What's the team with the bleakest future? Is it Utah? Is it Brooklyn?
I kind of almost want to say, I kind of almost want to say Utah, because I don't know if Danny Ainge is going to be able to pull off like the same stuff that he did in Boston in the Utah market. Like he's going to like this whole, holding on to Lauri Markkanen well past when he probably should have gotten rid of him. I feel like he's been sitting on other like serviceable NBA players rather than this, we thought he was going to fire sale everything as soon as he got to Utah. That hasn't happened quite yet. They clearly bottomed out. They've been trying to tank. It hasn't resulted in, a true blue, I don't know, top tier prospect yet. Maybe things work out with Ace Bailey. I don't know. Ace Bailey, TBD on whether or not he's still bought in on being in Utah. We'll see. There was a lot of drama about that pre-draft. And maybe that comes back to bite them in the butt. We'll see. But we want to know who you think has possibly the bleakest future of the teams at the bottom of the NBA scrap heap. Also, we want your power rankings. How would you rank the futures of the teams that we discussed here in the show? Or maybe we missed a team that didn't hit on that you think has a bright future that deserves some recognition here. Again, the teams that didn't make the playoffs last season. Otherwise, there were a lot of other young teams that have some bright futures that are in the playoff mix and everything right now. So that was the at least caveat of this episode. But we want your thoughts in the YouTube comments. For David and myself, thank you so much for joining us here on Locked On NBA. And until next time, we will catch you guys on our very next game night.